Next up, we have Valerie Phoenix, the founder and CEO of Tech by Choice. She's also a senior software engineer at Mastery Logistics. Wow, I can't talk tonight. Senior software engineer at Mastery Logistics. She holds a BS in psychology and art. Valerie is passionate about creating secure, human-centered digital experiences. As a successful self-taught developer, Valerie started Tech by Choice to give back to the community that helped her succeed. She's here to share about the awakening, and the systems that support it. And I'll pass it over to Valerie now.
So yeah, today I'm going to be talking about the awakenings and the system that support it. And I know with everything that's going on in today's world, it's hard to tune in to a lot of things because it's hard to focus. So I just want to say thank you to everyone who's tuned in and sharing space with me today. I really appreciate it. I had an amazing intro, so I don't have to talk that much about myself, which is great because I am an awkward person and we need to have less time of me being awkward recorded out there on the internets. So I appreciate that. I just want to go ahead and throw out there that Tech by Choice is a community for all underrepresented groups. And we try to help people learn that tech is a place for them. And we do that in a very authentic way by making sure that we cover vocational skills as well as career and personal development. Just yesterday, we had an open and honest discussion about mental health. So that's really cool and some of the stuff that we work on. If you want to connect with me, my handle is digitalblkhippie. I'm on Twitter a lot when I'm not doing community work and coding. So yeah, let's continue the conversation there. I'm on that platform way too much. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into this talk. And when I was working on this talk and creating the slides, I realized that in order to have a discussion about racism, we have to be honest. And I was looking at the title and I realized that the title I originally came up with was a disservice to marginalized communities and individuals who've been speaking up about the injustices and how these systems that are created were never created equally. They were never created with everyone in mind, and they were not created so that marginalized communities can succeed in them. So it was not marginalized people who were asleep. It was other people who refused to listen to the lived experiences of these communities and really take it in and be active listeners to what's going wrong, who are now waking up. And so I know with everything that's been going on with 2020, I feel like one of the main things that is changing is that we're starting to notice that that we're having a white awakening, and we're starting to notice the systems that support it. And I know I'm saying that it's a white awakening, but I want to make a point to everyone that it's not just white people who are becoming aware. Instead, it's this imperialistic mindset that's based off of racism and colonization and all of these other things that created periods like the Manifest Destiny and many others that I can point out in our history that has caused a number of people to treat marginalized communities across the globe differently. If we look at Western communities and Western civilizations, we know that there are a group of people who don't have European standards of beauty, and they're treated differently. The same way people who have different religious backgrounds are treated differently, and how the world views darker skin tones as a negative. The same way that gender expressions that fall out of the binary are viewed as wrong. And the same way that when your sexuality is not hetero, it's seen as strange. These are all ideals that come out of these systems that were not designed for us. And there's one that's very important that I want to talk about. And I want to say that transphobia kills. We know that, we understand that, but it's still running rampant in our communities. And it's not always white communities who are causing and benefiting from this harm. We understand that these ideals stem from racism, imperialism, and things like that. But we need to understand that people who benefit from these systems are the people who are still in power. So no matter how deadly these viewpoints are and the behaviors that these systems support, there are going to be people who either are from those communities in power or those who are trying to gain some type of power that are going to uplift some of these isms, whether it's sexism, racism, homosexuality, ableism. There's just a long list of things that we want to rid of this world, but it's being upheld because the way the system was designed is that these patterns and tendencies and behaviors are ones that are easy to fall back on if we don't take a moment to pause and ask questions and really think about the policies that we create or the environments that we work in. And this is especially true when we look at how all of these behaviors and systems play out in tech. Because tech is just a microcosm of the bigger world that we live in. I mean, if we look at the globe as a whole, the systems that are in place here can be replicated everywhere else in the world, and we see it and we understand that. But the one thing that is different and it makes it hard for some people to pinpoint these actions and see where they stem from is the fact that it manifests in different ways depending on the environment. So how can we break this down in tech? I recently understood what site reliability engineering is, and I think it's funny because these theories and these structures are something that I've been using in my life just to understand how to fix day-to-day things. But now that I understand and I have this vocabulary with site reliability engineering, or SRE, I now understand how I can apply this to everyday life. So I found this chart. It mimics the Milo's hierarchy of needs, but in the SRE realm. So it starts off with monitoring. These are the things that we put in place to see how an application is doing and if it ever goes down at any point. And if it does go down, we go a step up in the pyramid and we go into incident reporting. Depending on the issue that happens or arises, it gets passed off to someone who can debug it and try to fix it. And after that fix is in there, we do a postmortem. And from that postmortem, we are able to understand what the root cause was and try to really take a moment to reflect on different things that we can do and tests that we can put in place to go ahead and make sure that going forward, once we try to scale the application, that we are planning to and making sure that we do not have those issues come back up. And if they do, we know how to handle them. And so once you have that solid foundation, you're able to build out and architect this amazing application with the front and back end databases and all that stuff. And then you're able to take this to production and have it used by other people. So I understand that in tech, we have all of these systems that we build out, and we have all of these policies and procedures that are built in to understand if it's working and if it's not. And we also know if and when we need to do things to make it better. So why not use this same system to figure out what's not working in our cultures? We need to use this system to debug the systems that are now being amplified in 2020. So using that thought process, I decided to break down some of the things that I've noticed and witnessed in tech over the last few months and try to relate it back to the bigger systems at play. And I started off with the lack of monitoring that is happening in the tech industry. A lot of these companies, we never know what's going wrong until it blows up. Some of the companies that I listed here, like Gatsby, just a few days ago, we had a contractor share their experience of working at Gatsby and how negative it was and how all of those systems at play came out in ways that created an environment that wasn't welcoming to a lot of people. And it even came to light that some of the stuff that they were doing was illegal. And then we have companies like Pinterest, who recently over the years have been getting more and more recognition for having features that highlight diversity and inclusion. But we had 3 Black women come out and say that they felt like they were underpaid and they faced racist comments. And when they spoke up about this and tried to get those things to change and to make sure that they weren't working in a hostile environment, they were subject to retaliation because they raised those complaints. And then you have Lambda School. It's a coding boot camp, and in tech, we know that boot camps are the center of a lot of controversial things. But there was one article that I recently came across about Lambda School that was news to me. It was a former employee who was speaking out about the problems she saw with the way that they were handling diversity with their students. And she also highlighted some of the ways that she experienced microaggressions and racism while working there. And the company was actually coming after her and trying to sue her for speaking out about those things. Now, if we look at the bigger system at play, we see that what's going on here is the control of power. When you have these systems in play, in order to keep your power and to stay on top, you have to limit the access so that other people can't reach the top and take you down. So there's no real way for us to do those reportings, and there's no real way for us to get a health check on these companies without some irreversible damage happening, and we find out after the fact. So one of the solutions I came up with is that we should start using self-reporting tools like Good Job. Good Job helps keep the pulse on organizational health and because it's a third-party app, it increases transparency and reduces bias because you're not questioning if the company changed the numbers to make them look good. It's not their tool. It's just the employees reporting how they feel and what the environment is actually like. Now we move on to incident reporting. Incident reporting is sometimes very unclear in these tech organizations. It could be unclear because there's a lack of policies and you don't know who to talk to when something goes wrong, or you don't even know what you can and can't or can and shouldn't report. It's just no one really knows these things. And then you have to deal with the fact that if you do report things, you don't know if there's any checks and balances in place. And so if you're reporting someone higher up, you're not sure if anything bad will happen to you because you're reporting someone who has more power than you do. So looking at the systems in place here, again, it's a power thing because when you're doing the reporting and you're unsure of how the outcome will come, there's an inequality there. So we want to be very careful when we report these things. We sometimes don't report them because we know that we don't always have the power that we're looking for. So one solution that I came up with is that we need to create risk management systems that we can fall back on when things go wrong. Even in the realm of SRE, we know that we want to have steps written out for incident reporting, because when something goes down and it's in production, people's anxiety is already high. We don't want to just respond to things instantly in that state. So instead, we know that we need to manage these incidents effectively. And to do that, we need to have things listed out to reduce that anxiety and make sure that we are responding to things correctly. And this moves us on to the postmortem. This part was actually really difficult to break down and understand in the tech space because there's really no postmortem. When something goes wrong and someone leaves the company, the most I could really think about and did some research about is they do an exit interview. And during an exit interview, The HR department will ask you why you're leaving, if anything bad happened, and that was the cause of you wanting to leave the company. Now, there's been countless studies that show that most people leave companies because of their manager and not so much of the actual company. But HR still asks you these questions. But especially for marginalized individuals, HR and employees don't have the best relationship. I was told whenever I go through an exit interview that I should not tell the truth, because if there is at any point I want to come back to the company, it could be a liability for them to hire me again. So it was never in my best interest to tell the truth. So if this is the only postmortem we have, is this really effective? If we look at the systems, the bigger systems at play, it's power once again. And I want to point out the fact that a lot of these systems are centered around power, and the fact that one group of people are trying to hold all of the power. So at a number of different points, you see them restricting access and opportunity and making sure that the policies that are putting out there are benefiting them. So one solution that I came up with is that we can create clear policies. I've said this already in the slides, and it's honestly one of the easiest ways to make change. If we have clear policies and make sure that we are reducing bias and racism and all of those things and all of the isms, when we are making these policies, we will increase retention rates just by making sure that we are doing these things and making sure that we are taking the time to really understand why people are leaving and taking that pause to reflect and find different ways that we can make things better and increase those retention rates. The next part that we walk into is the testing. This was another great area for me when understanding the tech industry at large and how it interacts with these systems. The one thing that I did think of is the performance improvement plans. These plans are given to employees who are falling behind. They may not be hitting their mark and things like that. And the employers are trying to work with them to get them back on track and to keep them as an employee. But a lot of the times when I looked at the people who have been on performance improvement plans or PIPs, there was no real clear path as to what led them to get on these PIP plans. And when they got on the plans, the goals and KPIs that they had or key performance indicators that they had weren't that clear either. So it seemed very vague, and it didn't seem like it was anything that would be in the employee's favor. Instead, it just seems like another way to prolong letting someone go. So if we look at what systemic racism looks like, it's just a reinforcement of all of these policies and practices that are based on stereotypes and biases and all of these different things, but it's supported by policies. And this is what PIP plans look like. They look like, because they're so vague, they look like just another way to cover up all of the isms and reasoning behind why someone is being let go. So the solution here would be to create clear policies. And when we create these policies and making sure that everyone understands what is expected of them while they are employees, and even if they do go on a PIP plan, this will have an equitable impact on everyone. It doesn't mean that everyone will keep their job or anything like that. It just means that if you don't miss your mark or you don't hit your mark, you'll understand what mark it is, why you didn't make it, and it would be clear as to why you were let go if you are. The next part is the capacity planning. So this is where we start to scale and make things bigger. A lot of organizations scale really fast and things fall apart, and they blame it on scaling. If we look at Lambda School, we'll see that example happening there. They scaled really fast. They were probably trying to hit their quotas and make sure their margins look good and things like that. So they were trying to attract more and more students. But they didn't really pay attention to the harm that they were causing by the different tactics that they used to get those students in. A lot of the students that they attracted were from marginalized communities and lacked the funding that it took to go to Lambda School. So they took out these loans that were not set up to help anyone but the banks. So looking at this system, it's important to understand that a lot of these things that are at play has to do with systemic racism. And one of the key factors in systemic racism is ignoring the red flags and things that have happened in our history. If you think about it, when 2020 and everything started to happen, a lot of people kept saying, I can't believe it. It's 2020. Why is racism still a thing? I can think back to when Obama became president for the first time, and a lot of people were saying racism is going to end. Obama is president. All of the bad times in America are gone. Or they would say, like, it was so long ago, it doesn't matter. And that's how he became president. But if you look at any history book, you don't have to flip back that many pages to see that racism and all of these other isms weren't that far back. And the things that we are referencing didn't happen that long ago. So what happens when organizations scale and they don't take a time to pause and go back to the bottom of that pyramid and start over and make things better, they're just repeating things and just doing it at scale and causing more and more harm. So some of the solutions that we can have for this one is just stop trying to scale when your systems don't work. If we just take a pause, like I said, and start back over at the bottom of that pyramid, we can make improvements, and it wouldn't take as long as most people would think. And when you do scale, your margins will be higher because you've got it right and you don't have to go back and fix a lot of mistakes. Now, the development part of this talk is very frustrating for me. If we look at the hiring practices in tech, we can all agree that they're awful. Just a few days ago, I read this article that was titled, "People Like You Don't Belong in Big Tech." It came out from a blog written by Aiden Benjamin. The title, as I was reading the blog, I realized the title was a response he received from an interviewer after he shared that he needed additional accommodations due to his disability. The interviewer's response was, "People like you don't belong in tech." The only solution that I would ever suggest for a situation like this is to fire that individual who said that. Because imagine if this person felt so confident to say that to someone, what are they not saying out loud? How many people did that person let go because of some ism that they believe in? How many people did not get that raise that they deserved or that promotion because that person wanted to hold on to their power? It's things and people like this who are in power and can create the policies that continue to build and support these systems that we are trying to work and get away from. There is no doubt in my mind that the example that I'm showing here for the development section is institutional racism. And I say this even though it's related to ableism, what we're seeing in when people are playing out and having these tendencies and patterns that promote ableism is directly related to racism. You can't have one without the other. Racism and ableism is just a tool to put barriers on people. So by eradicating one, by eradicating racism, we're that much closer to eradicating ableism. So now we've gone through this pyramid, and if we don't do it right, we will get to the production stage and we'll build things like the facial recognition that doesn't pick up darker skin tones or different gender expressions. And all of the facial recognitions that doesn't work, it's usually built off of data, and the machine learning is using data that isn't clean. Like, it isn't good data. It's full of bias. It's full of racism, ableism, all of the isms. But it got to the production stage and it's out there and it's causing harm. Another example of tech that gets to the production stage that has all of the bad things baked into it is the Facebook ad algorithm. This is something I recently had to interact with. I was doing a mental health event for Tech by Choice, and it was focused on our Black members. And so I was trying to run an ad that had Black community and self-preservation. The ad was rejected multiple times because it was flagged as a social justice issue. Black mental health is a social justice issue when Facebook looks at it. We see that power, again, is at play with some of the issues that we see when bad code gets to production or bad algorithms are out there. But I want to make a key point here, that the power that I'm talking about here, it's not so much someone's trying to hold things back, but instead people are holding back individuals from being in positions of power to make a change and to make a difference. So the solution that I came up for this issue is to go ahead and make sure that we're creating environments that will allow more people to enter this space and have positions of power where they can create policies and change. But we want to make sure that they feel empowered enough to challenge the status quo. So through these stats, we can see that tech is really just a microcosm of the world, the larger world that we live in. But the good thing about that is we can change it for the better. In tech, how many people do you know that takes home tech with them? There are a number of people I know that use an agile methodology to plan out grocery shopping and events that they have for fun. We can use this logical thinking to be able to identify the thoughtless tendencies and behaviors that tend to come up from these systems that were designed to make sure certain groups do not succeed. And I know I said a lot of negative things about tech, but I do want to point out the fact that tech is starting to change. It's just slow AF. And when I think about this, I think it's very odd that as a community and as an industry, we can build these amazing products that can scale very quickly, but we can't get human interaction right. It's something to think about, and it's something that we can change. How fast and how effective the change is all depends on us. So I've come to the end of my talk, and I just want to say thank you for listening to me talk about these systems and finding different ways that we can pinpoint the different behaviors and tendencies so we can make the change we want to see. Just a quick shout out, Tech by Choice is trying to change the system for minority-owned businesses by running a hackathon to help take these business owners into the digital space and make sure that they thrive. If you want to be a part of this change, go ahead and check out our events website and see how you can get involved. And that's it.
All right. Thank you so much, Valerie. That was great. I loved all of the stuff you had in there. So many helpful slides. One of the things I find almost ironic is tech is almost always this like move fast, break things sort of mentality. And yet, you know, you just mentioned tech in terms of at least these kinds of systems is just slow, incredibly slow. And it's incredibly ironic, I think, just in general. How somebody had wondered, how do we keep feedback from becoming entangled with performance focused activities like reviews or OKRs?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah,
I think I'm a little jittery, even though it's like I'm talking to my computer.
that's fine. How do we keep feedback from becoming entangled in performance focused activities like reviews from managers or OKRs or other things like that?
Yeah, I think organizations that only hold feedback for reviews are not good organizations. Like, you need to have constant feedback to get the better reviews and to improve like your skill set and things like that. So I think if the system was set up that way, so it's just constant feedback, constant communication about what's working, what's not working, there wouldn't be any room to tie it to KPIs. And I think there are different ways that we can talk about improvements and not tie it to metrics. And I think that's one of the trickier parts. Um, just in tech in general, we don't do a good job at tracking non like code related tasks. I don't think we do a good job at that.
It's also interesting because we're so much into collecting all this data, but yet we almost don't have data on our own practices like this. Somebody had wondered if you had any thoughts on how to scale down systems that don't work, and how to insist on perpetuating and lifting people up.
Yeah, I've noticed that in most organizations, there's one little part of a org that gets it right. And something that I was recently told is that when you do have a part of your org that's getting it right, what you want to do is slowly add individuals from other groups that are getting it wrong, add them to the good team, let them get used to those practices and the way things work there. And then they will instinctively take that back to any group or any team that they work with. So if we can do that, it takes time that I don't think you can speed that one up. So it is going to be slow as AF. Wait, don't say bad words. So that's fine, but that's something that we would want to do at a slower pace.